Welcome to the Wellness Pulse with Monica Stevens. From CPR to self care, staying in rhythm with your well being. Thanks for tuning in. All right, good day. We've got Corrie and Jason Williams here. How are you guys doing today?
Just fine, thank you.
Good, thank you.
Thank you so much for coming on the Wellness Pulse and sharing with us your stories to encourage and empower our listeners. We just want to make sure that everybody understands just how important learning and knowing CPR is and the reason why we do what we do. So, with that being said, could you both tell us a little bit about yourselves?
Hi, I'm Corrie Williams, and I'm 51 years old, and I live on a farm. This is Jason Williams, my husband, and I've been CPR trained since I was about 16 years old. And believe it or not, he's my second save. I didn't get to tell you that. I've done CPR
Wow.
twice, and he's my second save.
That is awesome. So, well, with that being said, well, not taking away from you, Jason, but tell us about when did the first save happen?
Actually, I was working at Home Depot at the time, and uh, I was volunteering with the fire department, and one of the employees knew of that at the time and thought that that was the only reason why I knew CPR. He ran into one of the employees ran into the store and said, "There's a gentleman that collapsed in the parking lot," and said, "Corrie, do you know CPR?" And I said, "I do." And I ran out into the parking lot and I did my actions as far as trying to make sure that the gentleman was, I found him collapsed in the parking lot, um, unresponsive, and there was somebody on the phone. He was actively calling 911. I tried to arouse him, unsuccessful, and I started CPR with breaths, excuse me. Um, I had two other employees come out to join me, and we did rescue breaths and CPR on him till medics arrived. He did pull through. Medics arrived, they shocked him, brought him back. That gentleman survived for approximately 2 weeks. I'm not sure, I think in the hospital. Um, and then he did pass away, but he did survive for 2 weeks. He
Mm-hmm.
did, when they did pull open his shirt, he did have a big scar down his chest. So he obviously had other cardiac issues. So he
Yeah.
must have had some sort of open heart surgery at some point.
Yeah.
But we were able to save him. So that was my first successful save. That was my first time doing CPR. But
And and
that
you
was with
with breaths, and that's because and you said so your background, you said you were volunteer with the fire department?
Yeah, but that's not how I was trained. I was trained because I was a youth. I've been a volunteer with a youth group, non-religious. Just worked with children, and that's how I became CPR certified.
Awesome. So you just, what I mean, it's been something that you obviously valued and maybe had to do for the other endeavors that you were doing.
Correct. Plus, it was just something I wanted to do to make sure that I could help others in case there was a cardiac event.
Well, and look at that. And look like God had you in the right place at the right time. So
Yes.
now I did know about your second save apparently.
Yes.
And
Surprise.
I know that save was especially special to you.
Yes.
Yeah, that one worked out.
So,
Yes.
Jason, you've been so quiet over there. You want to say anything before we let Corey take the show back?
Well, I mean, I'm grateful. I mean, I'm a little overweight, but I'm healthy and don't have any outstanding, health conditions. My family has, they're farmers, and we have, heart problems reigned in the family and everything. But I never had high blood pressure, never have cholesterol problems.
No.
Don't have any pre-existing conditions at all, and so my event happened on August 4th of 2024, and on August 2nd, which was a Friday, I we had our day and we're
The
back
third.
together in the kitchen.
That was the
Uh,
third.
The well, the
The third.
Friday was the day I had the yeah. So, but regardless, um, we got back together in the kitchen, and I felt like somebody was like almost like taking their thumb and sticking it in your chest, and it felt like indigestion. It didn't exactly feel like indigestion, but there was nothing about it that triggered you to think it was a cardiac issue.
Mm.
What and I took two Tums and it went away. Like right now, like flick the light switch, it went away. What I've eventually found out it was my heart was in ventricular fibrillation, and it just straightened itself out.
You also said
So
you seen gray.
yeah, and it was a little bit hard to concentrate, and like you, looking back on it, I realized I was maybe a little,
He,
struggling a little more than I realized I was. But again, you take two Tums and it went away, so okay, it must be indigestion.
yeah.
So the next day we went out, we bought a truck, we had
We bought a farm truck.
yeah, so we had kind of a big day, but nothing crazy, and we had gone out.
Farm truck.
Yeah, but we had gone out, that night for dinner and came home, and I woke up at something after 4 in the morning, and like I had indigestion again, and I never get indigestion twice in a weekend. It was that same feeling. So I went downstairs because the Tums are on the top of the refrigerator. We have a 2-story house, and I went downstairs and I ate two Tums. And my side of the story is I woke up 3 hours later in the hospital. And what happened in the meanwhile is, and I have no recollection of any of this, but I had made it back upstairs. I took those two Tums, I made it back upstairs through a closed bedroom door, closed it behind me, walked across our bedroom, and our bathroom comes right off the bedroom. So I made it into the bathroom, which is, I was maybe 10 feet from her when I collapsed. She's dead asleep. It's 4:30 in the morning. So I dropped, and the bathroom's really, really narrow. This house was built before plumbing and electricity. So they took out the bedroom closets, and that's where my bathroom is. So our bathroom is literally the size of two closets, because that's what it started out as. So I kind of ricocheted off of the commode and off of the bathtub and everything else when I dropped. Um, she heard me fall, and she'll tell you the rest of the story from there. But what I can say is, I don't want to get spiritual or any whatever. I'm just trying to keep this as a scientific discussion. But there is no reason in the world I made it back upstairs. There's no reason in the world I woke up. Had I not woken up, I would have. She'd have found me in the morning. Had I not made it back upstairs,
Ooh.
she'd had I not made it back upstairs, she'd have found me in the morning. 3 hours later. We normally get up around 7:30 on the weekends, and just the fact that I made it upstairs was kind of, everything had to work out just right. There were several paths that this could have gone down, and only one of them has a positive ending, and that's what ended up happening. So she heard me
Amen.
collapse, and the rest of the story at this point is hers. I remember a little bit of bright light that I think was the ambulance, and I'm sure I'll tell you. We'll get into the voice that I heard, which was nothing. It ended up. It's nothing like the voice from above or anything, but I had a voice that I remembered that I was able to place a
That was
month
the
later, which is kind of we'll get to
we'll
that. It's
get-
kind of another part of the story,
Okay, so
but
we won't jump, but
I don't remember much. And I woke up in the hospital, and the first thing I remember is I'm in the emergency room, and I looked up and I'm like, well, I'm in the hospital. And I said, what happened? And somebody said,
well, hold on. We'll get to that.
well, this is just what I remember. And somebody said, you're in the hospital, you died, and your wife saved your life with CPR. And my dad was sitting there, and our son was sitting there, and Corey was sitting there. And I felt like I got hit by a truck because my ribs were broken. And I looked at Corey and I said, well, thanks. And then I blacked out again, and I had a CAT scan or an MRI or something that I don't remember. And then I woke up again later in intensive care, and the week went from there. But to get back to the meat and potatoes of what you're interested in, I took two Tums. I was downstairs. I made it back up through the stairs, and I collapsed in the bathroom. And then she can take over from there.
well, actually, I'm going to ask her to back up a little bit, and take it back to those days beforehand, because it's so, from a journalistic perspective, it's awesome to have you both here. I mean, I can't imagine how terrifying that is for you, Corey, because you know what I mean, have the memories and have the story. And so I am a woman of faith. And so I definitely do believe that, you know what I mean, God definitely was working on your behalf because, like you say, to be able to go upstairs and make sure that she's
There's no
awake
reason
and
I made it upstairs. There's not.
There's
yeah.
not.
So that, I mean, yes, it's just such a testimony. And you look so good. You guys look so good sitting there.
Thank
So
you.
Corey, you tell me, you're welcome. You tell me. So you go back to those couple days beforehand. And the other thing is, I don't know about you, but yeah, spending large amounts of money. I mean, I
And
hope it
it
never
wasn't
does
like
cause me a cardiac event, but
No.
it,
I
it
don't
was
like it.
exciting, but like I had the event the day before, so I don't think
he
they were related.
the only the day before he said he just wasn't feeling well. He says, and it's not normal for him to ever ask for Tums.
Oh,
Very rarely do I ever offer him Tums. And I says, well, here's some Tums. And he took those and he was like, okay, I feel fine. And the days later, a week later, he said, you know, that day I asked for Tums, he said, you know, I finally, he said, there was a gray part of the, like, I visioned gray, like there was gray. I said, why didn't you tell me that? But he didn't. And I said, not that I would have reacted to that,
yeah,
but
I didn't
it
even
would
think
have,
about it.
I, I don't know if I would have changed what I did, you know,
Right.
medically or reactive. So I don't know if that would have changed anything. Um, but anyhow, Saturday was a normal day, like besides the fact that we had made a big purchase. I mean, it was nothing unusual. We were already decided that we just, you know, basically we signed the papers. We made the transaction to buy the truck and we were excited. We went to Walmart, we bought some supplies for a project that we were getting ready to do. Everything was fine. Everything was a normal evening. We went to bed, everything was fine. You know, at 4:30 in the morning, I hear a big a thump in the bedroom or in the bathroom. And I yelled at him and I said, "Are you okay?" And he mumbled and I says, and usually whenever he gets hurt or something, he snaps like, "I'm okay." And I says, "Jason, are you okay?" And he mumbled. And I was like, "That's not right." I'm thinking he didn't bark back at me. I'm like, so I turned on my light and I see him laying in the bathroom. And it's, of course, the bathtub and the toilet are right beside each other and he's laying there in between. And I'm like, did he fall? This is unusual. So I go over and of course, unfortunately he sleeps naked and that's okay. That's how he sleeps. So I go over and he's barely breathing and he's gasping. As you said, you're a nurse and it's almost like what my mom was a nurse and she's passed, and it was sounded like a death rattle. And it was like, I can't
Uh-huh.
make the noise, but you know the noise. And I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening. Like this cannot be happening. And I'm now going into actions and I'm actively smacking his face, like trying to rouse him and smacking his chest and trying to startle him into waking up. Cause I'm thinking this isn't right. I go back and I grab my phone and I grab a hair clip because I have long hair. And I knew we were in trouble and I'm yelling at him at this time. And my son is a teenager. Of course, he doesn't sleep in his bedroom, which is right next to the bathroom. He's downstairs in the living room sleeping. I'm actively yelling at my husband and I'm calling 911. And I instinctively put it onto speakerphone and I set the phone down. And my son hears me yelling at my husband and he comes upstairs. I didn't hear him come upstairs.
I didn't either.
Well, you were just laying there. And as I was barking out clearly repeating myself multiple times to the 911 operator, because we live out, like I said, we live on a farm. We live out in what we call BFE because we are way out in the sticks. And unbeknownst to me at the time, there was a fire on the other side of the township. And that's where everybody was at. Medical providers were on the other side of the township. So I was telling the 911 operator where we were at and what county we were in, what our township. This was important information that a lot of our area doesn't relay. I was giving specific information, telling him everything I could about him, that he was, what his weight was, and they're like, told him that we were on the second floor, that we were going to need extra help because he was what weight he was, that we were going to need extra help, that it was a farmhouse, that we were going to need extra help getting him down the steps, that we needed help. And my son said, "Mom, what can I do?" And I knew that he was also CPR trained because he had just got his CPR certification because he was lifeguard certified in May. So I knew deep in the back of my head that I had backup, but I also knew as a mom that I could not possibly bear to watch my son doing CPR and my husband. I knew mentally I could not watch that. So I knew that I had to do it. And I knew that I was willing to. I've done it before and I could do it again. And I knew through all my training, and I just thought about all my trainers in the past. Out of the probably dozen people that I've had in my experience, all my trainers had just like, whoop, there they are. And then I heard the 911 operator and I says, "Do you want me to do breaths?" And she says, "No, compressions only." And I told her exactly what was happening. But my son said, "What can I do, Mom?" I said, "Help me get him into a spot where I can do CPR on him, because where he was at, I could not perform it." And I got him into the doorway and he grabbed his feet. I grabbed his upper body and I slid him over into the doorway. And I tried to give him one rescue breath. And I knew that was going to be unsuccessful just the way he was positioned. And the 911 operator, I didn't even tell her tried to give him a breath. And she said, "Just do compressions only." And I got my good hand placement and I started doing compressions. And I remembered my one trainer, like, make sure you get a good full release. And he's very barrel chested. And I knew that I had to go at least 2 inches deep. And I felt the cracks. I could feel, I knew that I was breaking cartilage or dislocating. And I knew that I was getting good compressions because I felt it. And I was making sure that I came fully up. I knew that I had good placement. I made sure my shoulders were over top because I knew that I had to make sure I had the strength. And I was just going fast and hard, and I was throwing out numbers. It didn't even matter what numbers I was throwing out. I was thinking 15 and 2. I was going 30. I was doing all kinds of different numbers, but I just kept a rhythm and I was yelling all kinds of profanity. There was if I said, "You're not doing this to me." I don't even know what the 911 operator was saying because all I was saying, "You can't do this to me. You're not going to die on me." I was calling them all kinds of foul language. Like I said, there was all kinds of cussing,
It's a
and
stress reliever.
it was. And why I kept saying, "What can I do?" I said, "Open up every door in the house, turn on every light in the house, go out to the driveway," because the house to the driveway to the road is probably 100 yards. I said, "Go out and make sure you have a clear path to get those paramedics in here. Make sure they know how to get in this house."
It's also, it was a very, very foggy morning, which will come into play later in the story.
And
And also, our driveway has multiple, because it's a working farm. There's a driveway to go behind the barn, a driveway to come up to the house. So,
we have three,
yeah,
there's
so
4 doors to get in the house.
Wyatt was able to guide them where they needed to be so they weren't lost on the property, just buzzing around looking for the right place to go. So
Yes.
Right.
he kind of herded them in where they needed to be.
Yes. So I started, like I said, I was doing CPR, and I was just going at it. And the sounds that it was coming from him were, they will always be in my head. And if I hear those sounds, it's disturbing, but I try to get over it. But I kept doing CPR, and at one point he kind of came to. He threw his arms up a couple times, like he was coming out of it, and I was like, "Oh my god, he's like and I was like, oh my god, I'm going to put him into a recovery position." So I tried to roll him over, thinking he was going into a recovery, and then he would go back into that like death rattle. And I was telling the 911 operator what was happening, and she was like, and then he was starting to slip back into that death rattle again. So I would roll him back over, and she says, continue compressions. I would recenter myself and start back at it. And at one point I said, where is all this water coming from? And I'm like, it's me. I'm sweating. And I was sweating so bad. I grabbed the towel off the towel rack, like the hand towel, and I like wiped off my hands, wiped off his chest. And I continued on just doing compressions. And it just seemed like it was for, I says, where are they? I, and it's, and I didn't know when it was going to end. And I'm like, and I says, where are they? She says, they're coming. They're almost there. And I had no idea how long it was. And finally I heard them, and I says, I'm upstairs. They showed up, and that's the first time I seen the paramedics. And I says, you tell me when I can stop. And they said, and I just kept at it. And they says, you can stop. And I stopped, and I got off, and I basically collapsed in Wyatt's room. Cause like I said, our rooms are collapsed or connected. And it was Drew and Tori. And Drew looked at me, and I didn't know his name at the time. And Drew says, are you okay? And I says, yeah, I think. And I mean, I was soaking wet. I mean, I was in my underwear and a cut off shirt. I look like shit, but I didn't really care.
Right.
And they did their thing. And um
They put
unbeknownst to me, they did try to tried to open up his jaw, but here his jaw had locked tight.
my
So
teeth
they
hurt
would
while I was in the hospital
they
because my jaws were clenched so tight.
they weren't able to.
Mm.
I would not have been able to give him a breath because his jaw had locked tight. So compressions only was only going to be the successful way to go. Um, the way that the room is set up, our upper floor, I was able to go through the other side, through the other doors, and I got to the other side to try to clear a path for them. Um, the other paramedic, as they were working on him, I was trying to clear a path, and I looked in there and I watched them shock him, and I watched him get shocked, and I said, oh, okay. I said, oh shit. And I watched him get shocked. And the paramedic turned around and said, here, fill this paperwork out. And I said, no, I said, I know that's a stall tactic. I said, because you don't want me to watch. I said, I can't see without my glasses because these are just reading glasses. I can't see without them. I says, good transfer. I says, I'm not filling this out. I said, you do your job, I'll do mine. I says, my son will fill this out. I went downstairs, continued on with whatever I needed to do, and talked to the paramedics, the other paramedics that were down there, and my son filled this out. He says, well, he said, where do I get a pen? I said, I don't know, fill it out. He said, what do I write? I says, fill it out the best you can. Talked to the firefighter that I knew. He said, are you okay? I says, no. Talked to the paramedic. I said, what hospital are you taken to? He said, she said, Jefferson. I says, okay. She said, do not try to keep up with us. I says, nope. I says, I will find you. She says, okay. I says, do you know what happened? She says, no. She said, I said, do you know if he's going to make it? She says, well, he's coming too. And when they were bringing him down the steps, it sounded like they were bringing a bear down the steps. He was grumbling and growling, and it sounded god awful, but he was breathing something. So they brought him down. They took him in the ambulance, and I, I called my dad. I called his dad, which his dad only lives. My father-in-law lives a half mile down the road, and it was the worst phone call I had to make. And they met us down at the hospital, but the entire way down the hospital, I told my son, I says, get in the truck. I said, he said, you want me to drive? I says, nope. I says, I need to be in control. He said, okay. He says, maybe I shouldn't be here. I says, oh, heck no. I said, you're coming along. I said, I need support and you're coming with. I says, we locked up the house. We drove down, which is only 15 minutes away. And I said, he's dead. I thought for sure he was dead.
Mm.
We got to the hospital. I could barely get my driver's license out of the and checked in. Well, I'm sitting there and my son was just hugging me, and I says, he's dead. He's dead. And he just didn't know what to do. They said, you can come back. And I'm thinking, he's dead. Like, he didn't make it. We walked down the hallway, finally get down to the main hallway to walk back, and Wyatt waves. I says, who are you waving at? He says, Dad. I said, he's like, what are you talking about? He says, Dad, he's waving. And I'm like, he's alive?
I don't remember that.
And I got there and he was alive. And the doctor looked at me and he says, both of them together, him and the doctor said, what happened? I says, he's alive. I said, I don't know what happened. And I said, I don't know what happened. I says, collapsed on the floor. I did CPR and here he is. And they were like, well, you did it. You know, you did CPR on him, you saved him. And the paramedics were freaking phenomenal. Tori and Drew were there. They gave me the biggest hugs ever. And they're like, you did good. You saved him. It was you did it. And they were like, if you weren't there, he would not be here. And it was just surprising. It was just surreal. I mean, it was nothing. You know, the first gentleman I saved had nothing compared to this, you know, and it was just unbelievable. Unbelievable. Um,
So I had gone into VFib, and that caused the cardiac arrest that, all of this happened with. And when the medics got there, we found out later they shocked me once, and I forget the term, but they jam a needle into your leg bone whenever you can't get a vein. I
That's
didn't have,
right.
Interosseous,
yeah, didn't have any heart.
interosseous IO.
Yeah, so I didn't have a heartbeat, so I didn't have any blood pressure, so they couldn't give me
An epinephrine.
an IV, so they gave me a shot of epinephrine, adrenaline to start the heart. I was apparently up and talking by the time they got me out of the house. I don't remember that.
You
And
came
I
two in the you
I
came
was
two up in the bathroom and then in an
and I
ambulance.
was asking the same question over and over again. So now she's worried that I have brain damage, and they're like, "No, that's normal." So I remember bouncing around in the dark, which I think was them getting me into the ambulance. I remember a real bright light that was either the ambulance or the emergency room. And I said, what I remember saying, what the hell happened? Like, what's going on? And this voice that I couldn't place either said, "You're at the hospital," or "You're on the way to the hospital. Your heart stopped. Your wife saved your life with CPR, and we're going to the hospital." And I never knew who that voice was, and it's hard to talk about. We went and met the medics about a month afterwards, and it was one of them. It was Drew. So we went and we met all four of the medics, and I was able to place that. And we laughed about it and talked about it and stuff. But
Especially the fact
I looked at Corey and I'm like, he said hello, and like that's the voice that I wanted to hear. That's the voice I was
Like,
looking for.
that's the voice. Like,
Yeah.
that's the
and I
voice.
said, well, they're not going to recognize you because they won't know
Yeah.
you're on.
So they didn't know. Now Corey had kept up. Now we help with our son's marching band, and there's always, at the football games, there's always a medical staff there. So the medical company was Southeast Regional EMS. They're from below Pittsburgh here, and I was working in the concession stand frying burgers, which is my usual job, and Corey was down helping the kids, and she called me and she says, "Hey, come meet your medics." So like I'm a nervous wreck. This is a couple months after, so like I felt like I was scared going. I don't know why now, but I was nervous going to meet them, and we had a girl on the color guard at the time that had some minor medical issues, and she had performed, and they were looking at her, and I was just standing there, kind of leaned against a chain link fence, watching them, and they didn't know who I was, and so she's talking to Corey, and Tori is the medic, Tori Bober, awesome lady, and Corey just like pointed at me, and her eyes got real big, and the other guy, Ryan Huss, was with her. His eyes got real big, and they recognized me. I'm like, "Oh, yeah, I'm here," and so then we all got to talking, and hugged all around and all that stuff, and I said I wanted to meet the rest of the crew. I knew there was four of them, and she said, "Well, they're going to be at the station tomorrow." So we had gone down and met all four of them, and that's when I realized who that voice was. So Drew Berkebile, Jason Teska, Tori Bober, and Ryan Huss were the four medics that saved my life.
Yeah.
So I got to thank them. And Jason said he had been an EMT for 20 years, and I was the second person that ever showed up to thank him.
Yeah.
So they were very touched. The whole thing was very weepy and very emotional, and they gave me a printout of my heart scan from the AED. So whenever I go to CPR class, I take that and I show people and like, look, this is not a heartbeat, and this big squiggly line right in the middle of it is where they shocked me, and then you can see my heart start back up. So I have saved literally the exact moment that they saved my life. And I look at that every day. I have it framed on my office wall. So
Yeah.
in the hospital, I went in on a Sunday. I was stable. Once I came to, I was stable, but we didn't know what had happened. And they put me on, they said, "Well, your ribs are all broke up. You're going to be sore. We're going to put you on morphine." And I said, "Honestly, I've been on morphine once or twice for various injuries. It's not going to do anything. Just give me some Tylenol." And she says, "We're going to give you Dilaudid. It's a lot more powerful than morphine. That'll do it." So they gave me that, and I didn't care about anything. And at one point, somebody came in, and he had a real worried look on his face, and he says, "You've got a needle in your leg that we got to get out." And I said, "Okay, take it out." He says, "You don't understand. It's in the bone." I said, "Okay, take it out." And he laid across my legs, and another guy grabbed my leg. Now I'm wearing a hospital gown, so what I felt was on my leg like somebody tugged your shirt. And their eyes got real big, and they looked at each other and shook their heads, and they walked out of the room. And I've come to find out later that extraction is apparently one of the most painful things in the world that somebody can endure. And I was so gooned up on the Dilaudid that it didn't matter. So I dodged the bullet there. But then Monday
I've had
morning,
Dilaudid. I got some good sleep, and it made my blood pressure so low I had to like pick my arm up so I could sit
yeah.
up. Oh, that was good sleep.
So Monday morning, the day after it happened, I'm in the hospital, and they took me down for a heart cath. And while I was, you're kind of in a twilight for a heart cath, and I've never been in a twilight before. But they wheeled me in, and I remember the radio playing, and the somebody said, "Okay, hop over here onto this bed," and I'm like, my ribs are broke. I'm not going anywhere.
Oh,
So they moved me over. I had
your
9.
ribs, they were he had
Yeah,
one
they were
dislocated
fractured.
and a cartilage.
Yeah, all the cartilage was fractured.
Dislocated or whatever. He didn't have any. They would never give us an exact number
Yeah,
of what was.
how many broke?
They were. I don't think they were actually broken. It was like cartilage
Well, yeah, the
displaced
cartilage
or
was
something.
fractured. I don't know how well
I did a good job on him.
I don't know how well you can see this, but that's my
Oh, she can't see that.
medical crew.
She can. You can
Yeah,
send
they're on my Facebook. But
Yeah.
anyhow,
Okay.
I had gone in for that heart cath, and I remember them saying, I could see my heart beating on the screen up above me, and I remember them saying, "Huh, he's wide open." And then I blacked out, or well, medicine got me, whatever you want to say, and I woke up in recovery, and it was funny. My cousin's now wife, at the time fiance, works in the recovery room in that hospital, and I didn't know that. So the first thing I saw when I woke up was her looking at me, and I said, "Well, hi, what are you doing here?" And she said, "I work here. What the hell are you doing here?" So we had that, but they ruled out a heart attack. I guess when you have a heart attack, you have like an enzyme release, and they can test for these enzymes.
She would know that.
Yeah, and those were not present. So between that and the fact that my arteries are as open as any, middle-aged, somewhat overweight guys are. I don't smoke, I don't drink, so my arteries were fine on my heart. I have no blockages or anything. So they ruled out a heart attack. And they said, "We don't know what happened, blah, blah, blah. So you're going to see an electrophysiological cardiologist later today." And I said, "A what now?" And so they told, I couldn't even say it at the time. So later in the day, guy came in, and he leaned back, he was wearing scrubs, and he leaned against the wall, and he crossed his arms, and he said, "I'm Glenn, I'm your electrician." And that was how we met Dr. Miskey, who is a very renowned electrophysiological cardiologist in the area. And he asked me some questions about my lifestyle, and he says, "You're getting a device, and it's just there in case this ever happens again." And he told me about it, and it's I now know it's a implantable cardioverter defibrillator. And he asked some questions, and I said, "Well, I live on a farm, I'm forever moving hay bales and this kind of stuff." And he said, "We got some that we could put under your chest like a pacemaker, and we got some we can put under your left arm." And he said, "Honestly, for you, the one under your arm is probably going to be less of an annoyance, So that's what we went with. And then Tuesday, I went down and I had that implanted. And so now I have the defibrillator under my left arm and 2 leads going to my heart. And if you press my chest just in the right place, you can feel wires.
Yeah.
And if you press like on my side, you can feel the device. So I love doing that and creeping people out.
It's creepy.
But it's something like this happens. If you don't have fun with it, it'll drive you nuts.
Yeah.
No, I love it. You got to laugh to keep from crying.
So, yeah.
What I didn't mention was when I told you it felt like it took forever for the paramedics to get there, and it was on the other side of the township. I did CPR for just under 15 minutes
Without stopping.
without stop. The only time I stopped was when I thought that he was going into recovery. So that was those few seconds of like those 10, 15 seconds that I thought he was going into recovery. With those 10 to 15 seconds, that gave me that few seconds to catch my breath, pause, and to regain my composure and to get him right back get back into position. So that, I think that was my saving grace for my composure to stay that long. And after all that, like everybody said, how did you feel afterwards? I believe it or not, I had a small bracelet on my one wrist. I actually had a blister on my wrist because I had sweat, and that bracelet had actually worn a little blister on my wrist because of how much CPR I did.
I believe it. I was going to ask how long it took you like after you knew, you probably were, I would imagine, hyped up on adrenaline. I was going to ask you, like, how
Yeah.
long did it? I don't even know that you really going through all that can gauge. I was going to ask you how long it took you to recover, but I don't think you probably really recovered until you knew he was okay.
Right.
Yeah. It was it was probably days. I
I'm
was
sure.
feeling pain. I was feeling odd pains in weird places. I was like, why do I feel like my shoulders hurt or my legs hurt? And I was wondering like how why, and I'm like, you like I called myself an idiot several times. I'm like, you idiot. You were like in an odd position and you were basically, in a
Worked
weird.
harder than you've ever had to work.
I was doing a workout for 15 minutes in a weird position. You don't plan on being on your knees for 15 minutes pumping on someone's chest.
Right, using all of your body weight,
Yeah.
Yeah.
making sure that you compress to at least 2 inches, doing a full recoil. I
Yeah.
mean, thank God you had the adrenaline.
So,
I can't imagine what that did for your relationship.
oh yeah.
Well, I was like, well, you owe me big time now.
I'm good with it.
I'm like, you owe me
So
for the rest of your life.
I didn't eat anything in the hospital. They had me on a cardiac diet and the
Oh,
food was awful. So I was hungry when I left on
oh,
Thursday, and we're on the way home. She's driving, and my cousin called. She says, "Hey, we're going shopping. What do you need? I know he's coming home."
weird.
I said, "Stop at McDonald's and buy me a goddamn cheeseburger."
Why?
That was the only thing in the world that I want. I said, "Get two because I want one for breakfast tomorrow morning."
Stupid.
And that cheeseburger is the best thing I have ever eaten in my entire life. It
Because you
was
were low on
amazing.
electrolytes, you needed a
Yeah, it
little
was
bit of
amazing.
fat.
And I came home and I have like a 3 inch incision on my left side, kind of in line with the nipple, like back under my arm where the device is. And that had like a wound vac on it under a bandage. And then I had one tiny little incision on my chest that just had a couple what stitches or staples in it.
Yeah.
And I think there were 16 staples on my side and like 2 or 3 in my chest.
Wow.
And so she was working at the school district, so it's August. She was not working. So the first day we walked the 100 yards, 200 yards, whatever it is, to the mailbox
Mm-hmm.
and back. And I have a picture of me touching the mailbox with one finger, that I made it. And the next day we walked a quarter mile out the road to the cemetery that sits out at the end of the road and came back. And the next day we lapped the whole farm. So, every day
Yeah.
I did a little bit more. I wanted to get out and do stuff, but she was pushing me. You're not going to sit around. Now, I couldn't shower by myself. I couldn't,
You
there
couldn't lay
were,
backwards.
yeah, there were,
It was,
I couldn't lay down for over a month. So I slept in a recliner with a maternity pillow coiled up behind me. That was her idea. And that worked out amazingly well.
and that was, you know what? That's the other part that, you talk about CPR and the importance of CPR. And then you also have the mental aspect afterwards. And that's the other part that a lot of people don't even discuss. And that's where the group, the sudden cardiac, arrest survivor group, they don't even like, they're just touching on the subject and they're addressing it, which is fantastic. The mental aspect of it. What's the aftermath? And it's the survivors of it themselves, like, are they afraid that it's going to happen again? What if somebody's not there? What happens if their defibrillator goes off? What happens if someone's not there to save them? What if they don't have that defibrillator
and
implanted
the
yet?
PTSD
And
on her, I don't have any PTSD. I truly do not have PTSD
I
coming out of this.
I have more.
She has substantial PTSD.
I'm getting better now.
We
Time
were
time is
our son
passing.
got his license now. At the time,
Oh,
he had his permit, so we were on our way home from a football game, and I was in the passenger seat of the truck. Wyatt was driving. We had another kid in the back seat, and Corey was in the back seat. And Wyatt and I both have pretty much the same sense of humor, and we were arguing about whether or not I had actually died. And he said, like, the whole thing was just in fun, but he's like, "You were stone dead. I watched you. I know you were dead." And I said, "Clearly I wasn't, because I'm here." And we're just goofing, laughing. And all of a sudden, she started just ugly crying in the back seat out of nowhere. And we felt horrible, but she knew we weren't trying to be malicious. And we stopped. Like, we weren't absolutely going to egg it on. And we did everything we could to make her feel better. but you don't even think about that, Monica. You just don't even think of your. I've had time. My dad is an 80-year-old farmer that's been, around this stuff all his, around farm life, has a grizzly side a lot of the times, and he's been around that his whole life, and he will get emotional whenever, like, I've goofed off and joked about it, and he has gotten emotional. I'm like, oh, okay. So I have had to learn to tone it down a little bit about joking about my own cardiac arrest,
But
because it bothers people that are close to me.
but even with that though, even knowing that doing that on you and doing CPR has that effect and has that chance of having PTSD, and it took time to decompress and everything, it still wouldn't stop me from, I wouldn't hesitate to
Right.
react to do it again.
Oh, yeah.
I would still, I still hear somebody choking or coughing in a restaurant, and I still go and I'm like, okay, they're okay. Or I hear somebody or I see something and I still want to react, and I will still, no matter what, if somebody collapses, I will still react. I don't care, because I want to help, you know. I don't care. To me, my PTSD is not the problem. I want to make sure that they're alive.
In my case, moving forward, I mean, I was diagnosed in the hospital with sleep apnea, so I have a CPAP now. So I'm
Yeah.
actually, in some ways, healthier than I was before.
Yes.
But the device has never gone off. I went to initial follow-ups with a regular cardiologist, with my EP, and with my doctor, and the both cardiologists. I went for my initial appointment with them right after it happened, and then I went for my 6 month in the spring. And the regular cardiologist says, "You're fine. We're going to put you on a 9 month rotation instead of a 6 month." And my EP said, "If you're still fine in the fall and we have no idea to think that you're not going to be, then we're going to put you on an annual rotation in the fall." And that, I see them Tuesday. So they are both considering me low risk. I have the device, it's there if I need it. I hope I don't need it, but I upload I've hang on my
Monday.
nightstand every Monday. I upload, and they track, what they're seeing, and then whenever I go to the EP, they put a paddle on my side that reads the device, and a Boston Scientific rep will be there, and he'll go back and look through, and they look at it so finely that the guy said to me, "Well, you had kind of a little bit of an irregular heartbeat here in February," and he got to looking, and he said, "Well, that was 3:30 on a Saturday morning, so you probably had a little bit of a bad dream, and kind of got worked up in your sleep." So it's that sensitive. The care that they are looking after me with is that detailed, that they can tell, when you have a bad dream or something. So I'm being monitored. I'm taking my medicine. I have to take one heart pill, one metoprolol once a day, and that's the only medicine that I'm on because of it. So no impact on my lifestyle. I can still do everything that I always wanted to. The device doesn't hurt, but it always feels like if you would put a cell phone under your arm or a roll of socks or something, and like clamp your arm to your side. That's what it feels like. So I know it's there, and it can be annoying sometimes, but it's annoying. It's not painful. It's not, I asked the EP, "Am I going to know if this thing goes off?" And he kind of laughed. He said, "You're going to know, and so is everybody that's around you at the time, because it's going to drop you." People say it feels like getting kicked by a mule.
Mhm.
So
They said it'll actually, you'll hear a tone too.
yeah. So
You'll hear,
yeah, they made it beep in the cardiologist's office. It's a little creepy when your person starts beeping.
Yeah.
That's a
I'm
little
gonna step
creepy.
away if I hear you sound off. I'm just
But yeah, that's
back away.
if it ever happens again. And like we go camping every summer with a group, and our pavilion that we go to has really sketchy
Yeah.
so they won't let me plug anything in. There's all kinds of, we have so much fun with it.
Oh yeah.
We truly do.
He has too much fun with it.
And it's, I wouldn't wish it on anybody, but since it happened to me, I'm going to make the most of it and make the best of it. So
Yeah.
joking around with my
We
friends,
do.
you know, the family and everything, sharing our story with people like you and people at work.
We actually, one of the jokes we've shared with our group is um one of the things of like the stories like, but did you die? You've heard that saying, right? And we said, "Well, way to go, Jason. You really took the fun right out of that one because we're like, but did you die? Well, yeah, you did. So thanks for ruining that one.
Just a little bit.
But you know, thanks.
Oh,
But bringing it back to the CPR, talking about all the different instructors I've had, and one of the things I like to share when I do talk to the classes and whenever he does, and how many have you been CPR trained?
Yeah, on and off.
On and off, he has been CPR trained. I have been, like I said, I've been CPR trained since I was 16. Um, but the one CPR instructor, it really stuck with me. And this is what I always tell a lot of people: the worst CPR is no CPR. Like, worst case scenario, try like I always tell them, look, the 911 operator, even if you've taken a class, listen to the 911 operator. It will come back to you, like the actions, the motions, where to put the hands. If you can't remember, listen to that 911 operator and it will come back to you. He or she will walk you right through it. And that's what I always tell every class I talk to, how important it is just to take one class, even if you don't get certified. Learn the motions. Just listen to the class. So I think everybody and speaking of that, when I talk to some of the other students in bands and stuff like that, and I just see some young people here, are a couple high schools, and I can't remember if it was I would actually, it was down in Virginia when I was down in school down in Virginia this summer for work. I ran into a young lady down there and I mentioned something. She seen my necklace because it said, "Thank you for saving my life." It was one of the charms that he bought me. And and I said, "Well, I did CPR on my husband." And she said, "You know what? To graduate high school, you have to learn CPR to graduate high school."
oh,
And I
good.
says, "Are you serious?" I said, "Oh my God, that is fantastic." She said, "Yes, it's one of those requirements." And I said, "Oh, that is fantastic." And unless you have a medical reason, you got to learn it. And I'm like, how simple is that?
Treat you in that way, but I forget just how many people um are not exposed to basic or what I consider to be basic first aid
Yeah.
skills.
Right.
Um,
Yes. It's amazing.
now I get, you can take a CPR class this year, and because you don't use it, I can get you being not confident to do it at a later date and time. I mean, you don't have to have a certification to learn CPR. I've gone
Right.
out and educated people at family reunions.
Yeah.
I love it when families want me to do kids, because it is more about having the knowledge in the moment. The
Mm,
certification, you usually have to show that to somebody, but to
right.
save a life, you have to be willing, and at the very least, you find the right place, pump hard and fast. You'll circulate that oxygen. I mean, if you
Right.
know better, you
Yes.
can do the breaths if they're able, and not in a position where you can open that airway. But if not, you're just, you do those compressions, circulate that oxygen. And so I love that mama wife, you know what I mean? Like, I'm
Mm,
gonna get it done type superhero boss energy. I love it. I know he loves it.
yeah.
The other thing is, and this was one of the things we told the paramedics, and they had actually asked us because we were being advocates. We were like, you know what? They had asked us, "Can we share your story?" And we're like, "Oh my gosh, certainly!" As much as our story can help others, please share it. Like they're like, "Well, we didn't want to like hip," and I'm like, "Please share it." And they even asked us, they're like, "Would you ever want to become instructors?" And I said, "Oh my gosh, yes." So that's actually on the agenda probably in the next, again, I'm in training right now for work. I said, as soon as I get settled, and like I said, I went to away for schooling and I'm still getting situated in my job. But as soon as I get my feet on the ground in my job, me and him are both going to become certified instructors for CPR. So that's next on the list to do. And hopefully we'll be able to also help spread the word and get people certified as well. But speaking of, and I don't want to, and we actually just had somebody, and I'm going to keep it, I don't want to say tight-lipped, but we had an acquaintance of ours just actually also had a cardiac event. Luckily, they pulled through. The person that they were with did not know or did not perform CPR, but luckily, they were able to get medical attention. The police arrived on scene fast enough, were
Hmm.
able to perform CPR. Um, they shocked that individual with an AED. They did recover, and so far, they were okay. So luckily, they pulled through, but I don't know how. I hopefully they don't end up with any deficits, but
Right.
they were lucky. How many people
Yeah.
are not that fortunate?
Yes.
So I just, I'm thinking they were lucky. I don't know how many more people are like that that will be that fortunate.
Right. You just don't know. So thank God they are okay.
Yeah.
Um,
The importance of knowing CPR are,
I'm sitting here.
yeah. Um, Life is too short, and you don't know when you're going to be called into action to save someone's life. And in less than 8 minutes, it's a matter of life and death. Within 8 minutes, he could have died, and I was able to keep him alive for 15 minutes until paramedics arrived. And without my education with training and CPR and 911's help, he wouldn't be here. I listened to 911. I listened to the training from all my instructors, and I was able to do it. If I can do it, so can you. I mean, that's truly what I always tell everybody I talk to. If I can do it, so can you. And the worst CPR is no CPR. So you gotta try. You can't just sit there and do nothing. Try. That's how I would sum it up.
I can't
did
really
he?
add anything to that. I mean, she's right. You know, you if somebody goes into a life threatening situation, I don't care if they're choking, I don't care if it's CPR, I don't care what it
Try.
is.
Try.
If you don't react, you're not going to do anything. If you react in some way,
You have to
you're
try.
at least making an attempt and doing your honest best to make that situation better and sustain that person's life. So
Try.
it's even more stressful when it's somebody you care about, but you know, learn what I think you'd be surprised, not never having done it myself, you'd be surprised what comes back, what you
You
don't even have to think about. Once
you
you have that training in the back of your mind,
you
you just know what to do.
you don't know what you can do until you try. Simply
So
put.
go take the class, go
Yes.
work with people like you, work with people who do this, and you don't have to become an EMT, you don't
No.
have to become a paramedic. Learn some basics and learn some skills and learn what to do in the unfortunate event something like this happens. I was 48 when I with no medical history when I just dropped out of nowhere. So there's no and again, I'm not gloom and doom. I don't, this is going to happen again. If it does, it does. I'm protected now. That's fine. But there's no reason for this to have happened. And I don't want anyone to live in fear. But at the same time, if it happened to me, I'm not going to be the only one in the world that it happens to. So, if you're ready, then you're ready.
Yeah.
Thanks again for listening. If you or anyone you know needs to learn CPR, first aid, or a life saving skill, please contact People's Choice CPR and Safety. From CPR to self care, the Wellness Pulse is staying in rhythm with your well being. I'm Monica Stevens. Take care.